أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم. Since a couple of weeks we had started discussing the subject of waqf. After we had discussed khums, the concept of khums, we had started discussing waqf. And in both these cases, the idea is that how in the Muslim empires, particularly, I'm talking of the Muslim empires, not just one Muslim empire, but in fact, the Muslim empires around the world. But among those Muslim empires, I had given some examples from Mughal Empire and British India, uh, just for example, so that we understand that what was happening at other places also. Now, I'm taking you to another slide just to show you that what is there are so many books, but for this purpose, mainly, although not one, but mainly what book which can be read just, I mean, for studying what I have been discussing here. And you can have your own research and you can decide yourself what to study and from where to study. But just I'm giving you an example that for example, Cambridge South Asian Studies. This study was done by the Cambridge University. And the title is Muslim Endowment and Society in British India. But in my discussion, I'll be referring to other Muslim empires also, not only Mughal Empire. Now, this is just to show that this is one book which mainly deals with the situation in a Muslim society in Mughal Empire and after Mughal Empire in the Muslim society of British India. And this is just an image which I'm showing you, placing it before you. And the contents also, there are many, but I have concentrated mainly on item number 6 of the contents. Otherwise, this book is much larger. Muslim endowments and the politics, politics of religious law, politics of not only religion, but politics of religious law. That is why, if you recall, I had said that how the Islamic law was referred here as Muslim law, which then ultimately came to be used as Muhammadan law. I had written a separate book on this subject, that is Political History of Muslim Law in the Indian Subcontinent. About 20, 25 years back, I had written that book. It is still available on the internet. It is in the digitized form also, but it's selling on Amazon also. So it's a Muslim endowments and the politics of religious law. Mainly, this chapter is relevant to our discussion. So I'm taking you back to the slides of our discussion. I hope now the new slides of the discussion have appeared before you. Now, the topic is for this discussion Waqf used for social and political power in the Muslim world. But we'll be mainly referring to the case of Muslim India. A discussion of Muslim history, as I had said in the case of Khums also, particularly in the case of the personal tragedy of Karbala, discussion of Muslim history solely in terms of abstract notion of faith or personal effect without historical context develops skewed perception of ways. Here we are talking about endowments, therefore I'm referring particularly to endowments only. skewed perception of ways in which endowments, which were basically waqf, but they were translated as endowment. And once they were translated as endowments, you will see that they were used as if it was one of the secular institutions which was applied across mosque and temple equally, in which endowments appeared and were used. Now, Muslims came to the Indo subcontinent in different ways as merchants, as soldiers, as administrators, and they belong to different ethnicities, linguistic groups, and so on. Muslim rulers created endowments. Now we are discussing the story of Muslim rulers because endowment was basically a Muslim idea. It was a Muslim institution created by Prophet, peace be upon him, that once it was translated as endowment, then it came to be applied in different ways in the Muslim world also. Earliest recorded waqf in the Indian subcontinent comes from 12th century AD, which means about 4 centuries after Islam came to, or Muslims came to the Indian subcontinent. North and west frontier. Now, where Pakistan is located now, the areas now comprising Pakistan was the place to settle and prosper at that time. It was a wealthy place, and there were so many favorable conditions that Muslims mainly settled in these areas that when Pakistan was created, the Muslims were in majority in these areas. And these areas, about 25 states and territories, they came forward to vote for Pakistan, to become members of Pakistan, to become or to form the federating units of Pakistan. About 25, there were 25 who came to join the group B, that is Pakistan. In most regions, Muslims remained minority in other areas of India, and their own contours of Muslim society had different backgrounds, as I've already said. Sorry. And they were also impacted by the non-Muslim environments. The non-Muslim environment or the population around. For example, we had discussed case of Awadh, or very prominent case. There is another prominent case of Hyderabad. Although the ruler was Muslim, but the majority of the population was not. And then the history took its own course. So it's now not, although it was a very powerful state. I think one of the most powerful states in the world at that time, and maybe one of states, not I'm talking of a country, state in the sense that they subsequently were translated to be called as provinces. So Hyderabad was one of the strongest and one of the richest state, not only in Indian subcontinent, but in the world. So the non-Muslim population in majority around them, it impacted their cultural ways. Wider and impactful interactions took place in the court. There were in the Mughal court, in the Muslim courts, there were non-Muslims also, particularly from Humayun. Humayun's second tenure, when he returned from Iran and reconquered India, then in his court there were not only Muslims but Hindus, particularly in the court of Akbar the Great, and then in the court of Humayun there were Sunnis, and besides Sunnis, the Shias also got a good share. Royal courts, markets, they were so at every place they were living peacefully and they had interactions. First Muslim territory which had become Muslim territory in the Indian subcontinent was Sindh. Muhammad bin Qasim, He conquered it and he ruled from Multan. This is why I'm giving this as a background, because in the first sentence I said that without historical context, when we start thinking, discussing things just from faith, then we lose contact with the facts, the historical facts, and we try to draw conclusions from faith, not from historic facts. Successive waves of invasion came from frontier, as I said, in the frontier region, which now forms Pakistan. And therefore, this territory at that time, and it continues to be, and it continues to have the porous border with Afghanistan. This territory, and it has the longest border in the subcontinent. So this territory was fluid. And in this fluidity, the impact was not only from Muslims on the other religions, but there was impact from other religions also on the Muslims. And particularly in Afghanistan, as the people have a very wrong myth, but the fact is that in Afghanistan, Afghanistan was also in different times conquered and ruled by, for example, by Alexander the Great. Then it was conquered and ruled by Hindus, which is called Hindu Shahi. And then by Sikhs, which is called Sikha Shahi. And then it was conquered and ruled, but it was conquered and divided, rather divided, not ruled, but I would say divided, and was conquered and divided by the British. So politically, this territory was fluid. Therefore, the influences were also fluid. They were both ways. Distinction between king and governor and territory and country were not clear-cut and significant. People, for example, the term state appeared in 20th century. The concept of nation state, welfare state in the West, it appeared in 20th century after Renaissance. But people here apply this term for 1500 years back, for example, to Medina, and they call it state of Medina, Riyasat-e Medina. But we have to understand the context of history. Individuals appointed by ruler in far-flung areas, they were very powerful. And now from here, another factor is appearing, that why endowments were formed. First factor, since there was fluidity, the endowments were formed not strictly in the Islamic terms. And the second, because of the power struggle in these territories, the endowments had a political angle. Because of the less stability, or you can say because of the political instability, particularly the rulers. They were the rulers who formed the endowments, and they formed endowments from the official funds, from the official lands, from the official resources. That is why it is a matter of more concern for study to understand how the Muslim empires were eroded from within. From within. Now, endowments, now we are coming to focus. Endowments manifested and also impacted donors and their connections, as well as wider array of believers. It's not only that the nature of endowments were affected, but the endowments, the way they were created, also influenced the believers or the donors who created these endowments because these endowments remained mostly revolving around shrines and mainly around one sect. There were other sects also, they also joined. They mainly revolved, we can say safely that they mainly revolved around shrines, and they also revolved around sects, Muslim sects, and other sects. Distinction of usages between public and private and pious and personal became misleading. Therefore, the concept of falah, hayal al-salah, hayal al-falah, and the concept of muflihun, concept of welfare, public welfare, and public in the state welfare or welfare state did not develop. This was the reason. In the West, the concept of public welfare developed, but in these areas, in Muslim areas where Muslims had empires, the concept of welfare state did not emerge because it remained confined around the rulers, their power, the warlords. And I have shown some of the examples from Africa also. Desire to gain religious merit, sawab, is not the only aspiration of the founder who founded the Waqf. When we study these Waqfs, for example, 40 from Awadh, we find that sawab is the dominating factor, but this is not the only factor. Sawab is there, the concept of sawab is there, but the dominating factors are political. It is because of politics. Place and time in which founders of those Waqfs lived also had the influence on the ambitions of making the Waqfs, Awqaf, and the basic, we had seen the basic dominating factor was the consolidation of the property so that it is not divided and it moves from eldest son to the eldest grandson and to the eldest great grandson and so on. This was the purpose, this was the objective. Social, political, and economic conditions of the moment of that time shaped provisions which were incorporated in the endowment. The 40 endowments which the book has studied, in these endowments, I have skipped that part, but if we could go into those examples, I had given one example only. I had given example of Husainabad endowment, who had invested funds in the stocks of East India Company, the occupier, the colonialists. They had given them loans with an interest. And when they conquered these areas, those loans were converted into the stock and they never got the money back. Awqaf was also used in ways to support sectarian institutions and shrines. And I had given, again, in the case of Husainabad, endowment and Awadh, and in many others also, you will find that what provisions are being made in the endowment, that what will be the salary of the son, of the grandson, of the daughter, and how much amount will be spent on the oil for burning lamp on the shrine, and how much amount will be spent on the tomb for its maintenance and expansion, things like that. No welfare, no public welfare. Whereas if we compare when the endowments were created in the West, we find that from those endowments, very huge institutions like universities, hospitals, even bridges, roads of public utility, bridges. Only in one case we find in the works of India, in Muslim society in India, that one bridge was created from the endowment. Otherwise, we don't find other examples. But in the West, the money went to the public welfare, the state welfare. That is how the welfare state came into existence. And I had given the example of Bismarck, that he, while addressing the Reichstag in Germany as emperor, said that, and he gave the idea of a welfare state, that what is, he himself raised the question and then replied that what is welfare state? He defined it as the practical Christianity. He said practical Christianity is the welfare state. The concept is based on that, he said. Management of endowments remained cause of frequent tension between religious scholars and rulers. It was not the factor which could unite them. Custodians of shrines, till today, they played an important role in helping the colonizers to colonize Muslim territories in the Indian subcontinent. And they continue to side with the military governments. They help them to take over, and they continue. You will always find them on the side of the dictators, all of them, not without exception. And there are names. This is history. Custodians of shrines mostly pitch themselves on rulers' side, which continues. Some rulers also pilfer sectarian institutions and shrines. They took their money. They pilfered them. It added to the struggle, this pilferage, it added to the struggle to limit state control. The ulama, the saints, the Sufis, the Gadi Nasheens of the shrines, they started struggling against the rulers who interfered with their income or expenditure, or they tried to control or conduct any audit. While state tried to make its loyalists as trustees, the ulama tried to retain their hold. They wanted to be the trustees. The second fallback position was that if we cannot hold it completely, then at least we should be made the trustees. Strong rulers in assessing domination, in asserting dominance, embittered institutions and ulama. That is how at some points you find that there was a struggle between ulama and the state. Otherwise, even I'm not taking the names, but otherwise these ulama, they were on the side of even the colonizers. They continued to remain on the side of the colonizers. They differed with them, or their relations were embittered only when their own interest was at stake, their income, their power, political power or social power. Then the struggle between them started. Now, we are talking about example in Iran. Buwaids, they were Iranians, dismembered. This is not my word. Dismembered endowment for over 100 years in Iran when they had ministerial monopoly in Abbasi Caliphate. They had no monopoly over Abbasid Empire, but they had ministerial say. They were in the court. They had ministerial monopoly in Abbasid Caliphate. Then Buwaids turned income of endowment to their own use, pilferage. The rulers started taking share from the money which was collected at the shrines and at the sectarian centers. They started taking their share. At first, they gave all beneficiaries a fixed sum to the beneficiaries of the shrine who were maintaining, for example. But then gave them a share instead of percentage from the gross proceeds. They gave all beneficiaries a share instead of a percentage. They said, whatever the income, this share will be given to them. This was Bowen administration for taking money from the endowments. Most profits went to support shrines of their sect. I had given example, and most of the examples we find were from the shrines belonging to Sufis and particular sects. They created endowments with the wealth they received from the office. All this money, all these lands were official, government lands, lands of the country. That is why it is a matter of concern, of study, at least for me. That is why I'm presenting it before you, that how the Muslim rulers ultimately lost the power. Because this money was not being used for the purpose for which these endowments were basically conceived to be created, to maintain armies. But the armies were not maintained. Instead of that, the shrines were maintained, the tombs were maintained, the personal luxuries were maintained, and the political and social power was maintained. However, changes in political fortune wrecked these arrangements. There were always clashes. And these clashes also went against the empire, Muslim empire, emperors, rulers, that they were weakened. How these endowments work for weakening the Muslim rulers. A scholar, some of these scholars, I'm quoting only one, he himself, Rashiduddin, 1300 AD, he himself founded a huge endowment. And following his execution, he was killed. There were scaffolds. His endowment was confiscated. His tomb, which was part of the endowment, his tomb was maintained by the endowment, was demolished because all it was political. There was a political struggle between the endowment managers or mutawallis. I had shown that at many places in India, even the local terminology was used. The terms like mutawalli were not used. And body was exhumed and buried in Jewish cemetery by Timur's. Timur Lung, he was the conqueror, he had attacked India. When Seljuk, now we are coming to Seljuk power, Seljuk Empire. Then Seljuk Turks ruled Iran at that time. Nobility received revenue from tract of land called Ikta. The name was different. And these Ikta, we will find that subsequently they were turned into endowments. Ikta landholding was not the personal property of the commander. Right from the beginning, I have been clarifying at different times that the lands were given to the landlords, to the warlords, to the commanders to maintain the army. It was not their personal property. But they turned these lands into endowment so that it remains within the family, and they did not spend out of that on the army. Rulers could revoke these assignments. Ruler had the power. If the king was powerful, he would always clash with them and take it back. So they would make the endowment. As soon as they get the land, they would make it an endowment so that if any ruler tries to take it back, there is public uprising. The people, they don't know what is the truth. They come to support the shrine. They come to support the grave. How the land mafia is working today, for example, in Pakistan. The land mafia first goes to place an alam, a flag, or they make a fake or whatever type of a grave. They put certain flags around, or they make some tomb or some mosque or some Imam Dargah, and they start expanding it. And ultimately, they grab hundreds or even thousands and thousands of acres of land. The new shrines which you see after the creation of Pakistan, you will find that they have been made on these grabbed lands. And it is continuing even today, uncontrolled. Politicians are involved, bureaucrats are involved. Now they have given it a new term, China cutting. When ruler was weak, nobles converted their iktas into endowments. Now iktas will become endowments. In the British Raj, you will find that these endowments were created from the zamindaris, from the jagirdaris, from the fiefs which were granted to the warlords to maintain the army. The endowments were created, and those endowments worked for them, not for the country, not for the army. They developed their own power. When ruler was strong, he generally moved against such nobles. Mughals moved against them, but they failed. They could not eliminate them. On the contrary, right from Akbar, they themselves started supporting these shrines, and they allocated more lands to these shrines and the sectarian centers. They themselves allocated. And not only that, but they appointed governors, qazis, judges from their families, the shrine Gadi Nashins, from shrine managers, mutawallis. And then those professions, services, they became hereditary. You will find in Pakistan, particularly in Pakistan, but in the entire Indian subcontinent, that caste like Qazi, or the designation like Molvi, they became castes. Qazi is now a caste in the Indian subcontinent because Qazi's son was appointed as Qazi without any merit, without any qualification. Since Qazi's son was appointed as Qazi and his son was appointed as Qazi and his great grandson was appointed as Qazi, it became a caste. Same was the case with Molvi and other professions. Qazi is a designation, but it became a caste. Endowment's religious character could not deter the rulers and nobles from its violations. They violated all the basic precepts, the concepts of an endowment. It was no more basically a waqf. That is why you see I'm using the word endowment. But since it was used as the translation of waqf, so we have to mention sometime. Reclaimed and repossessed waqf was reclassified as ikta. But where the emperor succeeded in defeating the warlords, the landlords, or the shrine managers, they reclassified, they renamed the waqf as ikta so that it could be dealt with accordingly, that this is state land and this land was given for the purposes, for military purposes. They reclassified. But again, when the rulers became weak, the people again went back and reclassified as waqf. This was a politics going on and distributed to other retainers. Ottoman Empire. I have been submitting, I had last time, a week before last, I had given an example from Africa and even from Musa Nusayr, from Nusayr, that how in Africa the endowments were created and the world. Ottoman nobles also had grants in lieu of salaries. Salaries were grants were given. These grants were given, which they turned into endowments in lieu of salaries. And the Mughals had tried to bring it back to the salary system. but they failed. They also converted grants into personal holdings. Besides endowments, they uh, turned into personal holdings. Now, we have an example of Egypt. Dr. Mamdou Salama may guide us better on that, but this is whatever I have studied. I'll present it before you, but it will take, I think, more than 5-10 minutes. Then let me go a little bit through this, and then whatever remains we can take up next week. But I think Dr. Mamdou Salama may be in a better position to throw light on this. Nobles of Egypt in 14th century established endowments in favor of slaves, Mamluks. Mamluks did a wonderful job in history. They were when their dynasty was there, when Qutuz was the leader, was the chief, they not only defeated, but in fact routed out the Mongols. Those Mongols who had annihilated Baghdad, these Mamluks they defeated and they annihilated Mongols, who served their households and soldiers and managers. In 16th century Iran, Safavid dynasty made confiscations and created many wakaf in favor of imams, a particular sect, and institutions of their sect. So I stop here. Next time, inshallah, we'll start from here, from where we are living. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzat amma yasifun wa salamun alal mursaleen walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.
اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه. اللهم اهدنا فيمن هديت وعافنا فيمن عافيت وتولنا فيمن توليت وبارك اللهم لنا فيما أعطيت وقنا واصرف عنا شر ما قضيت فإنك يا ربنا تقضي بالحق ولا يقضى عليك. اللهم ادخلنا برحمتك في عبادك الصالحين. اللهم اخرجنا من ظلمات الجهل والوهم إلى نور العلم. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. اللهم اجعلنا ممن يستمعون القول فيتبعون أحسنه. اللهم اكفنا بحلالك عن حرامك وبطاعتك عن معصيتك وبفضلك عمن سواك. اللهم بفضلك ورحمتك أعلي كلمة الحق والدين. اللهم انصر الإسلام وعز المسلمين يا أكرم الأكرمين. Oh Allah, spread your mercy upon us, shower us with your blessings, increase our knowledge, grant us forgiveness, and reward us with the company of the prophets in the Firdaus al-A'la. Oh Allah, purify our hearts, strengthen our faith, increase our knowledge, and make us benefit from what you have taught us. Oh Allah, forgive our parents and all our friends and relatives who have passed away. Oh Allah, make their graves garden from heaven and grant them the Firdaus al-A'la. Oh Allah, we have many of our friends and relatives who are sick. Oh Allah, grant to all of them full and speedy recovery. Oh Allah, guide our children, protect them, and make them righteous. Oh Allah, grant us the power and the ability that we may be grateful for the favors you have bestowed upon us and our parent, and that we may do righteous deeds that are pleasing to you. Oh Allah, we seek from you all of the good, whether we know it or we don't. And we seek your refuge from all evil, whether we know it or we don't. Oh Allah, we seek refuge in you from incapacity, from laziness, from fear, from greed, from poverty, and from the torment of the grave. Oh Allah, we have many of our brethren who are living under oppression and injustice. Oh Allah, heal their trauma, protect their helpless, and grant them lasting peace and prosperities. Oh Allah, we ask with every name you have elected for yourself, that none of us leave this gathering, but his pains have been relieved, his worries have been removed, his debts have been paid, his weaknesses have been concealed, his sins have been forgiven, and his needs have been fulfilled. سبحان الله وبحمده عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومداد كلماته. سبحان الله وبحمده عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومداد كلماته. سبحان الله وبحمده عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومداد كلماته. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على خير المرسلين. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.